Hello, everyone. So, yeah, the governor of Texas, dickhead named Greg Abbott, um, yeah, uh, they've made it a felony for parents and doctors to administer life-saving medical treatments to transgender children. Um, they've also, this asshole governor of Texas also um, is requiring doctors, nurses, and teachers, legally requiring them to report parents to Child Protective Services who aid their child in medically transitioning. And yeah, you know, Republicans, they always talk about the evils of government overreach, and yet they're the first ones to engage in government overreach, to use the government as a cudgel against marginalized peoples, to further marginalize people. Yeah. This is the hypocrisy of the Republican Party. This is why I talk about them all the time and how awful they are. This is fascism, pure and simple. Um, this is shit that the Nazis did. You know, you have to report your neighbor if they go against our moral code, um, and that's why people are rightfully um, identifying the Republican Party as modern Nazis. So, um, the effect of this, um, basically, what will happen is the parents will be legally punished, uh, potentially be thrown in prison for aiding their child in medically transitioning. Um, and of course, that child gets gets taken away from their family and put into um, foster care, which is problematic. Yeah. These actions will absolutely 100% lead to the deaths of trans kids. I can say that with certainty because I myself am a trans person. I know what it's like. I never felt such relief and such peace until I medically transitioned myself. Trans kids, trans people in general, already have it hard enough thanks to the rhetoric of the Republicans. Trans kids already get bullied because in conservative states like Texas, there are always going to be bigots, and those bigots have kids, and those bigots, they force their kids to be bigots. They indoctrinate them into it. That's why we still have bigotry. It's because every generation keeps indoctrinating the next. And trans kids get a lot of shit. They have trouble even going to the fucking bathroom in these fucking states. I knew I was female when I was 5 years old. parents never knew it because I knew what the world was and I knew who they were. So I had to keep that hidden for another 30 years to the world at large. It did untold psychological and emotional damage to me to keep that hidden. What these assholes are doing is wrong. And if you consider yourself a trans ally and yet you vote Republican, well, guess what? You're not a fucking ally. Because the people whom you empower with your vote do actual, real, deadly harm to the transgender community. You have to pick a side. You either have to choose to be a Republican or an ally of trans people. Now, if it were me and I had a transgender child, well, there'd be no contest. My kid would win every time. Sadly, some people think that paying a little less in taxes is more important than the lives of others. We've seen what the Republican Party does when faced with having to wear a little piece of fucking cloth over their face. They stomp their feet, they bitch, they moan. They have no problem spreading a deadly virus and killing people. These assholes are selfish, and they're fascists, authoritarians, whatever you want to call them. They're empowered by the mega rich who donate to their campaigns and who create right-wing extremist content on YouTube and every other social media platform. So, the Republican Party destroys families. Families of trans kids in this instance. Families of immigrants. However, there is one bright spot to this story. For some people, at least. The Air Force, of all organizations, the Air Force has come out and said that they are willing to relocate families, soldiers, and their families, soldiers who have trans kids. They're willing to relocate them out of the state of Texas to a base in a friendlier state, perhaps like the state of Washington. This is great. But the Air Force isn't doing it out of the kindness of their collective heart. I am by no means a fan of the military. I know what they do. I know the atrocities that they've engaged in within the past 20 years or hell, the past few decades. But credit where it is due. This move is a positive one. They're doing this because it's purely strategic, as one might expect. It's because if a soldier has a trans child and that child is transitioning, and the state comes in and tries to take the child away or imprison the soldier or the soldier's significant other, that can disrupt the soldier's ability to do their job, affects their readiness, and creates a psychological toll, which also affects readiness and the effectiveness of them to do their job. So, it's not being done because there's some humanitarian organization, but it's the right move to make in this instance, and it sends a clear message. I came out and started living out in 2015. It was 2016, I think, or maybe 2015. It's been a while. Just from my own personal experience, I've noticed a dramatic change in society and how people like me are treated. I'm not always treated well. I have faced my fair share of discrimination, but I face far less now than I used to. However, the government still employs bigots, even in organizations that are supposed to, the Human Rights Commission of Washington State, has its fair share of bigots. I know from personal experience. But things are getting better, and things are getting better because people have the courage to stand up to authoritarianism. People like myself, people like these kids who show incredible amounts of courage, far more courage than I had when I was a kid, in coming out and living out. And that act alone is an incredible force. We're here, we're out. We're not going away. We're not hurting anybody. We're not doing any harm. We're just asking that you basically leave us the fuck alone. Let us do our thing. Let us decide for ourselves what we do with our own fucking bodies and make it fucking easier. I shouldn't have to get permission from some cisgender asshole to get my fucking hormone medication or my fucking surgeries or any of that other shit. And neither should these fucking kids. It shouldn't be up to some dickhead who's bought and paid for by some rich asshole. It shouldn't be up to these assholes who gets to fucking live their life and how they want to fucking live it. Transgender people are not a public health crisis. We're not going to kill you in the bathroom. We're not going to assault you in the bathroom. In fact, it's trans people whom are assaulted and victimized in bathrooms and in every other fucking social setting. And in private settings too. This shit needs to fucking end. And as long as people keep idiotically voting against their own best interests and in voting for Republicans, it will only continue. The numbers of people who support the trans community are far larger than those who don't. The Republican Party is so flawed. The only reason they win election after election is because they gerrymander and they rig the elections. That is the only fucking reason that they win. Because they know that if they don't do this stuff, nobody's gonna fucking vote for them. I mean, when the government wanted to, certain forces within the government wanted to make mail-in ballots, which are standard in Washington State and have been for years and years and years, when other states wanted to make that mandatory, mail-in ballots, the Republican Party collectively shit themselves. And it was because, and even Donald Trump came out and said, if you allow people to vote by mail, nobody will vote for a Republican. You'll never have another Republican win again. Yeah, that's pretty true. That's why in Republican districts, where the overwhelming number of people in the district are non-white, the Republican Party closes all except for one place to cast your ballot. They have one open, you know. That's why they do this shit, because they know they can't win otherwise. Is that really the winning team? Is that what winners do? No, they're losers. They're losers in every single capacity. And here's the thing. The Air Force doing this, it's going to cost these communities a lot, because the more potential harm that these Republican lawmakers do to soldiers, the fewer soldiers are going to be in these communities. And of course, these soldiers, these bases, they bring in countless dollars to these areas. You know, through people paying rent, through people buying groceries, through people living. And so every single thing that the Republican Party does to potentially hurt individual soldiers, the more it's going to cost them, not only politically, but economically. So, careful viewers will notice that the Republican Party is constantly shooting themselves in the foot. Unfortunately, so is the Democratic Party, because they're constantly just playing the Republicans' game. So that's why, you know, we the people are not winning here. You know, our civil liberties and all this other stuff are being eroded constantly. But yeah, it's one bright spot. But you know, the Republicans playing to this very niche audience. It's fucking them, and hopefully it fucks them into an early grave. Anyway, that's it. If you encounter a trans person, just be nice to them. You know, just treat them like you would wish to be treated. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching.